Hi, it's Chala from P.S. I Love You. Thank you for joining me for another card. Today's card is actually a color throwdown inspiration, and the colors that we're going to be using for it are like a teal green, a sage green, and a gray. I'm going to be using the Altenew Needlework Motif stamp here, and I'm going to be inking that up with some Versa Fine Onyx Black ink. And I'm using just some Bristol smooth cardstock today on the standard A2 size card base. And loving my Tim Holtz platform here that I can get many images stamped at once here with that. Also using my Ranger White Detail embossing powder. And I'm going to heat set that up, because what I want to do today is actually I'm going to be pulling out my Zig Clean clear brush markers, and that embossing just helps keep that watercolor marker where I want it to be. Again, I'm not using a watercolor paper today, just the standard Bristol smooth cardstock. The colors that I'm going to be using are, let's see if I can remember here, it is the olive green, cobalt blue, and this is a gray brown, so not a true gray, it's just got a little hint of brown in it. So I'm going to go ahead and just lay the colors down. Again, that embossing is keeping the colors from running into each other. This stamp set is just gorgeous. There's so many possibilities of what you can do with it. And I just, as soon as I saw the color combinations for this throwdown challenge, which is my very first throwdown challenge, so it instantly hit me that this is the stamp that I wanted to use. I'm also going to be using, I think it is some, is it lemon yellow for the stamen? Yeah, lemon yellow. And just dotting that on the inside. Now, I also used a light green here for the leaves. And I'm using this clear brush just to smooth out the colors to give it more of that watercolor look. Now, after I went through here and I put all that water down with this clear water brush, I wasn't 100% happy with the color of the cobalt blue. I didn't think it matched the throwdown colors 100%. So I'm actually going to go back over top of that with a different color, and I'll show you that here in a minute. So again, once I get all these colors kind of blended together, it just softens that look and gives it more of that watercolor finish to it. So I'm using that turquoise green, and I went over top of wherever I put the cobalt blue, and it just really seemed to deepen that color up a bit. And I just like how that turned out. So I'll go ahead and use the coordinating die to cut that out. And then what I want to do is I have a standard A2 size card with a 1-inch flap that I cut there, and this Judikins window plastic, that's a heat resistant plastic, because I'm going to use that to stamp my sentiment on. So I'll go ahead here and just kind of line everything up. Now, because that acetate is kind of staticky, it makes it a little difficult to get down on my platform here. But I wanted to also be able to see where that sentiment will lie with the image. So I'll just kind of lay everything out here, making sure I have enough room for that 1-inch flap that I had cut. And then I'll go ahead and I'm just kind of wiping off any smudges that were left on the acetate using an anti-static tool. Now, the anti-static tool isn't going to work 100% because the acetate is still staticky. And I'm using that juicy Versamark clear ink there and some Detail White Ranger embossing powder. Now you can see here the static tool didn't work 100%, so I really have to flick off that excess embossing powder, and then I need to also go back in and very carefully with this paintbrush remove any of that excess embossing powder. Making sure as well that you take a cloth and just kind of clean off your work surface and that acetate as much as possible, because it is still unfortunately staticky and that embossing powder will cling to it. Now it is such a fine detailed sentiment that I bring in my Tim Holtz little pick here and just clear away any of those stray embossing bits there. Now even though this is a heat resistant acetate, it still can warp, and you really want to make sure that you heat your heat gun up really well before you bring it to that acetate, and that you're moving that heat gun around so that it's not in one place warping. Now I still did get a little bit of warping even though this wasn't supposed to, but it wasn't bad, so I just kind of continued on and just cleaning up any of, again, those little stray bits that are still stuck with static. So bring back in that base, and I have that 1-inch lip that I cut here, and I'm adding some score tape. This is a really great strong adhesive, and I'll add that to that 1-inch flap, and then I'll use that to adhere down over top of the acetate. Again, that gives it a really good bond between those two different mediums there, between the acetate and the cardstock. Now I did want this to be a little muted so that I could have my sentiment inside, but I'll show you what I do after I attach this die cut here. I'm using my Gina K Connect glue and just putting that glue all over the back of that die cut. This glue is really great because it is, again, very strong, and it allows you a little bit of wiggle room if you need to move your die cut around just a bit to get it in the perfect spot. So I'll flip that over and I can then see where I missed putting the adhesive. And then what you want to do is set this aside and let it set up for about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to actually just use a leftover tile that I had when I built my house, and I'm going to put that right over top. And it just gives it some good weight so that the glue can set up. Again, it doesn't take long, about 10-15 minutes. But once that's done, I can now go ahead and trim up the parts of that die cut that are overhanging the acetate. And I'll use my Cutter Bee scissors here. These are really great sharp scissors. I usually end up using these for fussy cutting. But I like how, again, the fine point on them, the fact that they actually come with a little cover for the blade itself, because otherwise I truly would be poking myself with it all the time. You can use a guillotine trimmer if you're braver than I am, but this just seemed to work for me with the scissors. Alright, so again, I won't be able to write a sentiment inside the card because that's clear, so what I decided to do was put in some vellum. And so that's, again, standard A2 size vellum there, so that's the 5.5 by 4.25 inches. I'm using that score tape again, and just going to apply that to the back of that card front. And although it did soften it, it's not going to be 100% to cover the sentiment. Like, I'll still be able to see a sentiment in the back. So I will then cut again another A2 size card base here just to go behind that. So I adhere that down. I use some teal sequins that I got from the dollar store. I used a 1/8 inch foil cardstock in teal to add a little band around there. And now on the inside I'm going to be using a 4.25 by 4.25 square here to be able to write my message on the inside. And I'm using the other stamp and inking that up with some soft gray dye ink from Umbrella Crafts ink dye there. Quickly stamping that down, so I know that was really quick. Using my platform here so that I can ink it up several times to get a good image. I really like to clean my stamps off as I go. I don't like the ink sitting on there. Just using a tape runner to apply that to the inside of the card. And that really just, it finishes off that card. The only other thing I do is I add my Wink of Stella to the inside because every card needs a little bit of shimmer. If I did this again, I probably would leave the, I don't know what I do, how I'd get that acetate on there again, but I'm just not sure I 100% like how all the different pieces came together, but I did love the finished product of this card. Again, it was my very first color throwdown challenge, so I really enjoyed participating in that. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's card tutorial. I know it was a bit sketchy in how I got it together, but at the end, it is a nice card, and I'm glad it turned out well. I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you for all the likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions. And I really hope that you guys have a wonderful day. If you want to see more videos, go ahead and click on these ones and have a great day.